There's a fortune in failure. If my son could survive long enough to gain the size and strength necessary for surgery, he'd have a shot. But it was a long shot at best. The planned surgery was very complicated, and they would be operating on a heart the size of a walnut. When the time came, we planned to take him to one of the best surgeons in the world, Dr. Al Pacifico at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. I can only marvel at the skill and nerve of surgeons like Dr. Pacifico, who pioneered life-saving techniques like the one he used on my son. Every time they step into the operating room, medical professionals face long odds. The possibility of failure is high. When they fail, someone dies, and others lose a precious loved one. We need to rethink how we view failure. Most of us see it as bad, as something to be avoided. Some of us believe in this perspective so strongly that they miss the golden opportunities because of an unwillingness to risk failure. The rings are there, but the shovel is in the shed. It used to drive me crazy in college when my friends were interested in a class but refused to sign up for it because they were afraid they could not get an A. Instead, they signed up for easier classes that they weren't interested in because they considered them safe. Who knows what rings of opportunity they passed up? Maybe sparks for a new career or the discovery of a passionate lifelong avocation were left buried in the rubble for fear of failure. In business, I see this phenomenon all the time. How many of us hold back from trying new things because we are afraid of how we will be perceived if we fail? We don't share ideas in meetings for fear of sounding stupid. We don't float that new product idea for fear it will be rejected. We won't even order new items on the menu at lunch for fear of being disappointed. That critical inner voice in our heads holds us back from trying anything new where failure is a possibility. One of the wonderful things about children is that, for the most part, they don't labor under the burden of constant self-evaluation and apprehension, and feel freer to try new things. I recall riding along with my 6-year-old daughter as she drove a miniature race car at the amusement park for the first time. We jerked our way along, swinging wildly to and fro. I can still remember her head tilted back, hair flying, eyes closed, and face contorted with pure joy as she exclaimed with delight, "I guess I'm not as good at this as I thought." Kids don't consider failure a bad thing. They don't even interpret it as failure. And when we look at our kids, we don't see failure as a bad thing either. We recognize it as a tool for learning. When our kid strikes out for the first time, fails a test, gets reprimanded for talking in class, we often say, as part of the debriefing, "What can you learn from this?" With children, we recognize that failure is a tool for learning, and we rightly view it as preparation for success. But if we dig for new rings and come up empty, our inner voice isn't so generous. "You screwed up. You failed." In turn, we're more likely to give up digging all too quickly. For adults, our ego is so tied up in being immediately and consistently perfect that attempting anything in which we might fail is incredibly uncomfortable. We passively stay on the sidelines, not willing to risk appearing foolish. This in itself is foolish, because almost nothing of value is created without the path to success being laden with obstacles and hard work. It took Thomas Edison thousands of tries before he perfected the light bulb. The point is that if your initial attempts at finding the ring come up empty, keep at it. The ring is there. You just haven't found it yet. Use failure as a springboard to success, rather than as an excuse to give up. Here's a formula to help reshape your attitude toward failure. Passion plus patience equals long-term success. This should be your mantra whenever you find yourself in the middle of a long-term dig that, so far, has come up empty. Passion means that you dig only for rings you care about. That's key. Patience means that you recognize that some digs will come up empty. It's to be expected. Rather than viewing empty digs as failures, consider them instead as stepping stones to success. If you combine a passion for what you are doing with the patience to keep digging after inevitable setbacks, you will discover that there is a fortune in failure. The story that follows is a perfect example of this principle, and I hope it will inspire you to keep on digging when times are tough and the till is empty. His life was hard. His father died when he was 6 years old, and his mother had to work 2 jobs to make ends meet. For several years, this youngster took care of his younger siblings, including cooking their meals. Adolescence treated him no more kindly. He fought with his stepfather and moved away, taking a job as a farmhand at age 13. Later, he became a streetcar conductor. At 16, the young man joined the military, spending a year in Cuba. After his stint in the military, he returned home, married, and had 3 children. But even during adulthood, his string of misfortune continued. His life seemed to unravel through a series of failures. The man had started a manufacturing company specializing in gas lamps. A trend toward rural electrification made his business obsolete almost before it began. He studied law through a correspondence course and became a lawyer. only to lose his practice after a violent outburst with a client in the courtroom. Finally, he opened a gas station and added a small restaurant after customers asked where they could get a good bite to eat nearby. And there his luck seemed to change. This one-table, six-chair establishment grew to a 142-seat restaurant, complete with a motel and gas station. It seemed that he had finally found success. Customers loved the simple, down-home meals he served. But when he tried to expand on his success by starting a chain of restaurants, the chain failed. Not to be deterred, the man moved to North Carolina and opened another restaurant and motel. That failed too. Ultimately, he opened a motel that was successful, at least until gas rationing during World War I curtailed travel and forced him to shut down once again. Shortly thereafter, his marriage ended. Eventually, he remarried, this time choosing one of his employees. Professionally, he kept on digging. The reopening of his business after the war became his greatest success to date. By the early 1950s, his restaurant business was worth $165,000, and he explored franchising both the restaurant and his popular recipes once again. It appeared that he had it made at last. Then, the rubble of change struck again. The government built a highway that bypassed his town and his restaurant. Once again, his business crashed. Eventually, he auctioned off his property for $75,000 to pay off his debts. By now, he was 66 years old and practically broke, living off his meager savings and skimpy Social Security checks. Every ring he had ever found eventually gave way to a new pile of rubble. What more could he do? All of his digs, despite his passion, had eventually turned up empty. Reflect for a moment on all the setbacks this man endured. A lesser man would have given up, probably long before this. Few would have blamed him if he had. He had given it a good run, but things just didn't work out. Clearly, it was time to quit, but he refused. This man was still fueled by his passion for cooking and the recipes he had perfected over the years, and he had the patience to wait for whatever enduring success was to be his ultimate due. Undaunted, he packed his beat-up car and traveled the country, sharing his recipes and cooking methods with all who would listen. The finer restaurants took a pass, but many mom and pops accepted his offer. They paid him 5 cents every time they prepared a dish using his methods. 4 years after staring disaster down yet once again at age 66, he had 400 franchisees in the fold. 3 years later, he made $300,000 in profits before taxes, and 1 year after that, he sold the business for $2 million. His image remains the marketing face for the franchise to this day, and currently the business has more than 11,000 units in over 80 countries and territories. What's the answer? This man was Colonel Harlan Sanders, founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken. If frustrating change has thwarted your dreams, perhaps remembering this story will help you through difficult times or periods of insecurity. Sanders' series of failures served as a proving ground, preparing him for the success that was to follow success born of his passion and patience. And what links the two is faith. Faith has two faces, one religious, the other is secular. Almost all religious faiths preach belief in a higher power. Calling on and relying on this higher power is a powerful way to endure the downtimes change sometimes brings. I encourage you to nourish, cherish, and lean on whatever religious faith may sustain you. What I call secular faith is not a passive belief that everything will turn out okay in the end. It's an active belief that if you keep digging and trying without giving up, good things will happen. One way to keep the faith in dark times is to remember that sometimes today's rewards won't be apparent until tomorrow. The ring may lie just beneath your feet without you knowing it. Practicing these two P's does not ensure success. However, not practicing them almost guarantees failure. After all, a life devoid of passion is hardly a life at all. And if you don't practice patience, you're likely to flit from one thing to another, never stopping long enough to plant the seed that can thrive and turn into your life's passion. The act of digging for rings does not guarantee success. At times, perhaps many times, you'll come up empty. When you do, remember this bit of wisdom from Henry Ford. Failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. Most important, when you fail, it's what you do next that defines the line between winning and losing. Losers give up and go home, condemned to a life of complacency and resignation. Winners keep digging with passion and sustain themselves with patience. A patience born of an active faith that better days lie ahead. I was perusing Monsanto's website recently and ran across a story that one of the company's employees shared about his father, a longtime farmer. Early in life, I asked my father, "What would you do if you couldn't farm?" He struggled with the answer and finally said, "If I couldn't farm, I'd probably find some work, save a little money, and try to get back into farming." Farming isn't a job in my family. It's a mindset, lifestyle, and tradition. Michael Doan, area sales manager, Monsanto. That's what it means to have both passion and patience. And this is the recipe for long-term success. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to channel. One love.